The C minor Prelude is a case study on the importance of voicing in chords, as well as a wonderful exercise on practicing your chord technique. It is, after all, just a short little piece of chords. Let's start with a brief harmonic analysis of the piece so that we can start talking about the importance of voicing. This prelude is short and sweet. It's got an A section and a B section that repeats. Let's take the A section, which itself is just 4 measures, and every measure is like a self-contained, simple little harmony. So the first one, we're in the key of C minor, and we've got a C minor chord, that's our 1. This is an F minor chord, that's our 4. F is the 1, 2, 3, 4th note in the scale. So C minor is the 1, F minor is the 4, G major is the 5, and the 5 takes us back to the 1. Worth pointing out that the 4 chord has this E flat, so it's an F minor 7, and then our G chord has this D sharp in it, which makes it an augmented chord. But it's an augmented chord that very quickly resolves back to just our standard G7. So the harmony here could not be any simpler. It's a 1, 4, 5, 1, which we've seen millions of times. But consider what happens if, instead of playing it with the voicings here, if we just played basic, what I think are called root triads. So just our C chord is C, E flat, G. This is our F chord, our G chord. So if we just do this, it loses a lot of its charm, If we start playing around with the voicing, let's do something like this. Our F chord is not going to be this inversion. This is our G chord. This is back to our C chord. Suddenly, it's a little bit better because instead of having a upper voice, let's call it the melody of the chords that just jumps around quite a lot, like at the beginning, pay attention to this high note. In our first version, the melody kind of jumps all over the place. But in our second version with the inversions, notice how a little melody kind of comes out. And sure enough, in Chopin, the melody becomes even more interesting. This is still a C minor chord, but we've got this inversion where we have a G in the upper voice. The G moves up to an A flat on our 4 chord, and then it moves back down like this. So that's just a nice melody. Same idea continues. So in the second measure, we've got another 1, 4, 5, 1, except now we're in the key of A flat. So we've got an A flat major chord, that's the 1. A D flat major is our 4 chord. The 5 is E flat 7. And once again, if we were to play these chords just like this, I mean, it sounds okay, but it loses a lot of the charm. Proper voicing gives us a melody that we can hang on to. Hear that? Do, 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 do. It's not just the melody. I wonder if that's what voice leading is. I really should have done some research to figure out what voice leading means. I think, I might be wrong, that voice leading means when you're voicing your chords, you make sure that the upper voice has a shape, a little melodic shape, so it's not just all over the map. So besides the upper voice having some sort of shape, it's not just that, the rest of the voicing matters as well. So for example, try playing some of these chords, but taking out, I don't know, well, we can't take out the 5th. Well, let's take out the 5th here. So there, 2, 2. If you take out this C note from our F minor chord, it loses some of the stability, okay? Because in a chord, the 5 gives a lot of stability, right? So this is our F minor chord. Our root note is very important because it's what the chord is built on. The 3rd is very important because it makes it major or minor. The 5th is also important mostly because it gives a lot of stability. The 7th is important, gives more flavor. So a good thing to do with this piece is try taking out some of the notes. Like let's take out the 3rd. Ooh, very different. Try taking out the 5. Try taking out different notes of these voicings, and you can see how the separate notes in a single chord give it a flavor. To finish with the A section, in the 3rd measure we have a little, this is one of the little funkier of a harmony. We have a G7 chord, and this is really the 5 of C major, pretty standard. But then we move to F minor, which is the 4 of C minor, but not C major. And then this F minor moves to C minor. F minor moves to C minor. So it's not clear, are we in, I guess we're in C minor because we have an F minor chord and we end on C minor. But the 5 chord, this G, resolves to a C major chord. Interesting. I guess you could say that the C major chord is actually the 5 of F, right? If this is our F minor, the 5th is C major. So I guess you could say we're in C minor and we've got our 5 chord, we got the 5 of the 4, so C major goes to F minor, and then C minor. And then in the 4th measure, we have 5-1-5-1 in the key of G. This is very clearly a D7, which is the 5 of G major. D7 again, resolves to G major. So very, very simple harmonies, just a bunch of 1-4-5-1s, 5-1-5-1. But the voicing is very, very important. It really gives it a lot of shape and a lot of flavor. In the B section, we can apply a lot of the same ideas. The chords come out they're pretty obvious what these chords are. This is a C minor, A major, A flat major. This is a diminished 7th, G minor. These are all chords that are pretty natural in the key of C minor. The voicing, again, becomes very, very important. It gives it the melody, right? But I want to point out one more thing about the importance of voicing. Notice how, for example, in the 3rd measure, 3rd and 4th measure actually, just in the 3rd measure, we have once again a 1-4-5-1 in the key of C minor. So C minor, F minor, G major, which resolves to C minor. Just like at the beginning. But notice how our bass note is no longer the root note. So on the C minor chord, in the bass we have this E flat. And then we have an F in the bass over the F minor chord, but then over the G chord, we have a B in the bass. This gives it an instability. Having the 3rd in the bass, right? This E flat is the 3rd in our C minor chord. Makes the chord feel, well, again, less stable. So whichever note you have in the bass, whether the root, the 3rd, the 5th, maybe the 7th, each one of these choices gives the chord a different feel. Me personally, I'm not by any means an expert on voice leading. It feels like every time I hear a 3rd in the bass, it just feels very unstable. It's hard for me to really feel like, oh, this is a G chord. So yeah, very interesting with these slash chords. I do want to mention one more thing in the in the first two measures of this B section, we have a chromatic line in the left hand. Notice that, it's very interesting. See how it falls on chromatically? And yet the harmony is so, it's so natural. And we have a funky chord in the second measure. I can't help myself but point this out. We're doing a 2-5-1 in the key of G. So in the key of G, our 2 is A minor, our 5 is D major, and we resolve to G major. But notice how Chopin does it. All right, this is a minor, right? It's an A minor 7. Our 5 chord, however, is like this. Notice how this is very clearly a D7, but in the bass, we don't have an A, we don't have the 5th. We have this A flat, so that we can continue with this chromatic, right? We have a chromatic bass line. This 7 chord, the 7th over a flat 5, happens a lot. It happens in the A flat major prelude as well. So we'll talk about it more over there. But I just want to point out it's very interesting. It still sounds very natural. It's very clearly a 2-5-1. But having this strange A flat in the bass instead of the D chord gives it, again, an interesting feel. So very interesting in voicing which note you choose to put in the bass. Okay, we know the structure, we know the harmony, we know the voice leading. How do we actually execute all these wonderful chords? Recall from our A major prelude episode how a piano actually works, the mechanics of the piano. In that episode, we talked about it in the context of the pedal, but you can't know how the pedal works without knowing how the piano works. When we play a chord, we want all the notes to sound at the same time, right? We're not rolling the chord. We really want everything sounding at the same time. So basically, not basically, literally, we want to touch the strings such that every hammer gets launched and hits the respective string at the exact same time. The mechanics of our playing apparatus is very complicated, and I'm not going to go into details of levers and fulcrums and all that stuff. So let's simplify things. It helps to think about it in a slightly different way. If we want to play this chord, right, and make sure everything sounds at the same time, imagine instead of using our hands and our fingers, imagine you've got like what is it called? Like a stamp, something that you stamp an envelope or a seal or whatever with. So imagine you're holding on to a little handle, and then over here under the handle is a long piece of just rigid wood or metal, whatever. It's a long ribbon. And then connected to that, did I say ribbon? It's called a plank. Connected to this long piece of metal here, or wood or whatever, what have you, we have a bunch of pegs. Imagine we have a peg right over the C note, we have another peg right over the E note, and another peg right over the G note. And essentially all we're doing is stamping down on the piano, right? So we've got our 3 pegs, and we're just boo, going like this. So as long as you're holding this thing very flat and you're moving down in one motion, those pegs are going to hit the keys at the same time. They're going to push down the keys with the same force. The hammers are going to get launched in the same way, and they're going to hit the string at the same time. It helps to have this in mind as you think about how we were to do that with our fingers. So imagine you're holding your hand in a claw. Okay, don't do a claw. It's not good technique. But imagine you're holding your hand in such a way, okay, such that you're falling down like this, and then the keys get pushed down just in the same way as if you had this example, right, where we're holding on to something and we're just pushing down like this. Same idea, okay? I mentioned levers and fulcrums and all that stuff. Let me explain that just a little bit. Imagine, for example, that you're not sustaining your claw. Again, don't do the claw. But imagine you're not sustaining, you're not holding your wrist rigid, you're not holding here rigid, you're not holding here at the shoulder rigid. Let's focus on the wrist, for example. If my wrist were floppy, okay, what happens if I try to do this claw? Don't do the claw. I go like this, and instead of the keys being pushed down, my wrist is just going to keep falling, okay? Like this. However, if I were to fix my wrist, if I were to fix this lever, okay, suddenly the keys are sounding. So when you're doing this, you do need to fix all of these levers, the muscles in your hands, here at the wrist, here at the elbow, here at the shoulder. Your back muscles need to sustain everything. So if you're sustaining this claw, don't do the claw, and you let your hand fall, you will play the chord such that every note sounds with the same volume. This is where things get a little bit trickier. What if we want, instead of having every note sounding equally, what if we want one note to be louder than the others? We still want all the notes to sound at the exact same time, but we want one of them to be louder than the others. Very difficult to do. You can see me attempting to do it. Before we talk about how to do this, you need to come to grips with a hard truth about the piano. That truth is that nothing matters except the speed with which you push down on a key. Okay, it does not matter how passionately you look up at the ceiling as you play. It doesn't matter how gently you caress the keys or with how much passion you slam down on them. It doesn't matter. You could play the piano. I think somebody said you could play the piano with a bunch of the tips of umbrellas, and it's the same thing. And that is true because, again, I repeat, nothing, and I mean nothing matters at the piano except how fast you push down on the key, which translates into how much force is put into the hammer, which translates into how fast it moves, which translates into how loudly the string sounds. That is it. Tone does not exist on the piano. Only thing that exists is how loudly that each string is vibrating. This concept was actually used, is the basis for why player pianos work. So in the early 20th century, I don't think it was even in the late 18th, or maybe it was, like right at the turn of the century, this technology came about whereby you could measure the speed with which a hammer hit the string. So right in the instant before the hammer hit the string, you could measure the speed. And you could have let's call it recording of a piece. So somebody would play the piano, and this apparatus would record, at second 1, this B note the hammer for the B note hit the strings with this speed. At 1 second and 20 milliseconds, the D sharp hammer hit the string with this speed. So it recorded very carefully how fast the hammers were moving before they hit their respective strings. And with this data, you could put it back into one of these player pianos, and it would play back the same way that the pianist played. So the piano would essentially play itself. And with these recordings, we have Rachmaninoff. So we have Rachmaninoff's playing on these, I think they're called piano rolls. We might have Debussy as well, I'm not sure. But yeah, and they're very faithful. When Rachmaninoff listened back to one of these recordings, he was surprised. He said that we've really captured the way that I'm playing. And it's all based on this idea that tone doesn't exist. It doesn't matter how you caress the notes. All that matters is how fast the hammer moves before it hits the string. So with that in mind, let's go back to our example. If I want to make one note louder than the others, what we want is we want all 3 of these hammers to hit the string at the exact same time, but one of them has to be louder. That means that one of them has to move faster. So we've got two different hammers, okay? Let's go like this. They have to hit the strings at the same time, but one of them has to be moving faster. The only solution for this is if one of them starts moving before and then the other one after it, okay? So notice that they both land at the same time. They landed here, but this one started moving first because it's slower. And only after the softer note is put into motion do we start playing the louder note, so that we have one note that's louder because the hammer moved faster, but they landed at the same time. I really wish I had a very good camera and also a real piano, so we could test this out and we can have like slow motion captures to see this in action. But this is essentially what I'm doing when I'm doing this. It's very difficult. Takes a lot of effort, and in some hand positions it's easier than others. But this is the principle that I'm applying. So to practice this, I don't want you to hand wave things away and be like, okay, I'm just going to try to lean into the louder note, or just like, really visualize that what I'm doing, one note is going to be louder. No, be very, very conscientious and very, very practical about the technique. I suggest starting with 2 and 5 with just 2 notes. And I think 2 and 5 are good fingers to practice with. And choose various hand shapes. Here we're on the black notes. This one is harder. Or like this. Well, this one's very hard. Looks like the 5 is pretty loud. And try, first of all, before you play the notes together, play them separately and really ensure you have very strong finger independence, okay? You can independently move each one of these fingers, whether softly, louder. Here we're getting louder, back to soft. And only after you have this very, very good finger independence, from soft to loud, can you start trying to put them together. And literally, the soft note, push it down first, and only after you start pushing down the soft note do you push down the loud note a little bit later, so that they hit the string at the same time, but one of them is louder than the others. Once you do that with 2 notes, you can start with 3, 4 notes, and so on and so forth. In this piece, very important, you really want to bring out that melody. Not so much. I shouldn't say it's very, very important. There are other pieces where it's even more important, like again the A-flat major prelude. Here you really have a beautiful melody that you want to ring out. Here it's not as important, but you still want this top voice to be a little bit louder than the others, but probably not exaggerated. The fact that it's the top note is going to make it ring out just naturally, but I think it is a good idea to have this chord technique so that you can make it ring out even a little bit more. All right. That was it for chords. Happy practicing. Chords are beautiful. Everybody says you should practice your scales in your arpeggios, which is true. But I would add chords to that. I think it's really the next step after chords and after scales and arpeggios, to have chords under your belt as well. All right, let's do it. Let us play this piece.